Right, hello and welcome to another episode of the Long Ball Football Podcast, a weekly podcast by two brothers about all things football in Portugal. You listen to myself, Albert, and as always, I'm joined by my brother Barney. How you doing, Barney? How's things?
Yeah, all good. Thoroughly enjoyed our Monday night football watch along last night.
Mm.
Um, One of the big teams playing, Benfica, which we don't always have. But it was a good game and a good little catch up with everyone.
Yeah, no, it was lovely to see a lot of people from our Patreon group on that watch along. If you're interested in getting involved in those, definitely check out our Patreon where you can get involved in future ones. One of the things we were discussing at the end is we do them once a month, and obviously there's only May left in the season, so there's only one left in the season. But one thing we're definitely going to do is a watch along for the relegation playoff games
Oh, nice.
because those are always really good games, and yeah, always interesting to see a new team, what a team that could be joining us next season. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for those if you're interested in joining us. But yeah, it was a good game last night. We're going to talk about that shortly. We're also going to be talking about Porto, Braga, Chaves, Estoril, and maybe even if we've got time, Famalicao versus Porto. So plenty to discuss as always. Before we get started, though, just a quick reminder that if you enjoy the show, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or a star rating on Spotify. And like I mentioned, if you want to get involved even more with things like the monthly watch-alongs and our predictions league and all that good stuff, you can join us on Patreon for just £1 per month. And a link to that is in the description of this podcast episode. But without further ado, let's get stuck into some football and start, as we always do, at the top of the table, which means once again starting with Sporting, who have done, I think it's fair to say, Barney, everything asked of them recently, and put themselves 7 points clear at the top of the table. They beat Benfica in the derby. They won those two games in a single weekend, including their game in hand, to extend their lead to 7 points. And now this week, they faced Vitória in a home game against a very good team, having a very, very good season, and a game which definitely could have been a potential banana skin. But it's another test that they passed with flying colours. They were 2-0 up at halftime, and they ended up winning the game 3-0. Another huge step on the road to winning a league title. And the best bit for me, Barney, was not just the important win and 3 points, but the fact that it was such an impressive and dominant performance against one of the better teams in this league.
Yeah, it was a big week if we can take into account the previous two games as well against Gil Vicente and Famalicao. Um the results, the 3 points of all that matters, but although the Famalicao game was a little bit trickier for them, just winning by the one goal, this was another. Yeah, just I saw a bowler went with the headline after this result of it translates to imperious, which I think is a really good word to describe them, or how they've been recently. You know, they've had a real focus, a real winning mentality. Um, I've also liked how they're scoring a lot in the first half, and then to sort of draw parallels with like I don't know, for some reason I'm thinking of Arsenal who was fighting for the title, but it seems to perhaps score more goals in the second half. You know, Sporting have scored, and this is by like so much this is so much higher than any other team. They scored 13 goals within the first 15 minutes this season. No other team has got into double digits. Um and it just keeps, that it continues from there. Um in terms of first half goals and the amount they've scored. And obviously in this stage of the season when these games will be that bit tricky, getting those early goals, settling the nerves, um vitally important. Um I I really like Pedro Gonçalves in this game, and I think Trincao Trincao sort of caught the headlines. Gyökeres obviously had his not time in the sun, but he had his bit when and nobody could stop talking about him. But Gonçalves is in this really nice bit of form, and Thomas da Cunha, the sort of Portuguese football pundit who I really respect. This, he put it quite eloquently. He said that he describes this version of Pedro Gonçalves as indefensible. You just can't. you can't defend him. I mean, we've seen that, some of the his contributions to some of the goals recently have been such high quality. I mean, his finish in this game was perhaps fortunate the way it came to him, but he still struck it really well, getting into the bottom corner. And I think, yeah, just a player who I think Amarin's managed really well in terms of expect no, not necessarily expectation, but do you know what I mean? Like he's I've never felt like there's been a pressure on Pedro Gonçalves. He's always been in the team, although he was put in different positions. But and when he hasn't been like coming in with like incredibly high goal contributions when Gyökeres and others were, he still, there's never ever a doubt that Pedro Gonçalves would be in this team. And I think that's really paying off now because we're seeing him really get back to that level that we know he's got.
Yeah, I mean, he was the first player that I picked out from this game as well. Um, and something that I saw on Twitter from I think B24 was really telling about his record in the Primeira Liga going back 3 or 4 years now. 2020-21, he had 26 goals and assists combined. 2021-22, he had 26 goals and assists combined. 2022-23, he had 33 goals and assists combined. And now this season, 23-24, he's got another 33 goals and assists combined. So his record in the Premier League is outstanding. And it has been for a number of years now, important to remember that this is a player that was signed from within the league, so it wasn't always on the books at a big club. And often with those players, they don't quite reach the heights of the players that come through the academies at Benfica or Porto or Sporting or whatever it is. But he's had an incredible career so far. Um the only thing he's not done yet is really make his mark on the national team, which I think is probably the next frontier for Pedro Gonçalves. And hopefully Roberto Martinez, who's we've seen be very receptive to the players within the league, will pick up on that more because I think he's been underused. And I mean, when you look at those numbers, I think you can only say he's been underused. And this season, once again, a fantastic season for the best team in the league. And yeah, his he continues to improve his reputation.
I think the interesting thing with him though, Albert, is that I feel like that this position in this sporting team it feels like it's the only position that he would excel in. I can't imagine him as an out and out winger in a sort of 4-3-3 system. The fact he's playing in this 3-4-3 system, allowing him to come closer into the middle of the pitch, and find spaces there, I think is one of the reasons why he does so well and getting that more touches in the box, closer to goal. I just I don't doubt he could do it at another club in another system, but instinctively, I feel like this role is just perfect for him, if you know what I mean. Like I don't think he's a 10. I don't think he's a wide winger. I think this, sort of, if you want to say left forward, if you will, is the ideal position for him.
Yeah, and I think he's an interesting one as well because he's 25 years old now, so he's not necessarily the name at the front of the queue to be a big sale. I mean, I don't think he's going to be. Well, I think he's not exactly going to be the next Trincao, is he? Although that obviously didn't work out exactly as we expected. But do you know what I mean? He's not necessarily going to be like the next 21-year-old kid going off to an elite club in Europe. So I think he could definitely move on if he wanted to. And I think it would be, like you say, interested to see him and in different pastures, trying different things. But also, would it be so bad if he was to make himself a bit of a legend at that club? And Sporting's a great level, playing in Europe all the time, winning titles. It could be the perfect place for him to make a reputation for himself and to catch the eye of national team manager, which I'm sure is his next objective. But whatever happens in the future, Pedro Gonçalves, just another player to add to the list of Sporting players this season who've had great seasons and contributed to what will probably be another title winning season under Amorim. And I really do associate Gonçalves with Amorim in many ways. They've been together at Sporting the whole time, and he definitely seems like one of those players that Amorim has complete faith in and complete belief in, and in many ways has built a team around him so often over the last few seasons. Um, Marcus Edwards, Bonnie, a player who's quite rightfully struggled to get back into the team based on the form of Trincao and Pedro Gonçalves, who have been pretty much undroppable, and Trincao again, excellent in this game. And I'm really pleased to see Trincao doing well. At the beginning of the season, he was a player that I picked out for Sporting as someone who needed to have a big year, and it started a bit slowly for him, but he's really settling into a great patch of form. But it was nice to see able to come off the bench and just remind us of the impact he can have. Could have had two goals. Obviously, one of them was ruled out for offside. Made some good chances. Um, it says an awful lot when a player of his quality is struggling to get into the team.
Yeah, I do find it interesting. I think we're seeing Amber rotate a lot more this season, but it feels like perhaps Edwards isn't being rotated as much as he would like. Certainly, you look at other areas of the pitch. Brancances has had a quite a, sort of a good run of games now in the midfield. With Marita and Huelman coming out and when he's come in. Um, Even at the back line, the combination of centre backs this season is, it seems like it's a different combination of the three every game. And St. Juice alongside Kratz and Inacio for this game. Quaresma's had a few games. Yeah, so I think I've not really got based this on anything, Albert, but I do feel like if we are looking at Edwards in particular, that perhaps Aaron does need to be careful not to sort of demotivate him by
Mm.
not giving him a fair shot. But then, like, as you say, Trincão's been excellent. But Trincão's been so good, and I do like he is quite different to Edwards, although they're both sort of left-footed right wingers. Trincão sort of does like to come a bit deeper, get the ball, and likes to play passes as well, which works well. And in this game, Gyökeres benefited from both Pedro Gonçalves and Trincão's ability to find a man and getting two goals, which was much not needed, but he's been on a bit of a goalless streak, so that's important for the team. Yeah, it's a really nice problem for Aaron to have at the moment. That strength and depth.
Yeah, and we're getting to that point in the season, not with Barney, where it's we're saying a lot of the same things about Sporting every week, but like, yeah, I just want to reiterate. I think the thing that I took most from this performance, from their perspective, was not just the win, but the fact that, and this is something I've said for a few weeks now, the fact that they are meeting every challenge with flying colours, and they seem to be peaking at exactly the right time in their season. So, um, we look forward to what the next couple of weeks holds for them in terms of a couple of big games and potentially clinching the title in the next couple of weeks. Just quickly for Victoria, Barney, hard to discuss their performance in this type of game. One thing that I did want to flag was that despite it being a loss, they now sit 13 points ahead of Aruca in sixth place with only 4 games to play, which means that mathematically they have now guaranteed themselves European football next season. Of course, what European competition that is could still be decided, but at the very least, I think that's a good achievement for a club like Victoria. Top five guaranteed. At the very least, we'll be playing Europa Conference League. And again, as we've said time and time again, considering the start to the season that they had and the managers that they went through, it's a remarkable achievement.
Yeah, and the sort of the squad's starting to fit it at this point of the season. Their midfielders heavily changed. Andre back from the dead coming into the midfield. Um, Jota Silva rested as well. And Bruno Gasper not playing as well, who's been a really important player for them. Not just defensively, but going forward as well. He's made a real difference to the Victoria team. No, they've been fantastic this season. Perhaps we could be a little bit disappointed from this performance, considering some of the performance they have had against the bigger teams recently. But um, arguably, you could also just sort of see this as I'm sure they didn't, but write this game off and look at the other games to sort of try and push their
Hmm.
themselves up the table for the running. But no, there's promise. There's promising signs of some of the players that Alvaro Pacheco's brought through. Carlos Caesar as well. I'm quite excited to see more of playing up front, the young Brazilian. So yeah, there's they've been fantastic, and that hearing you sort of say they're the 13-point gap, putting it in perspective, that's a healthy gap, and that's exactly where Victoria want to be.
Bearing in mind they've had to overtake those teams in order to get there and then extend the gap to 13
Mm.
points. It's yeah, important to recognise that. I think. Well, let's talk about another game, Barney. And as you mentioned at the top of the show, our Monday Night Football watch along, our Patreon exclusive event was this week for Farense versus Benfica, and we were treated to four very good goals. Benfica went ahead through Kochu before a great strike from Balumi equalised for Farense. An equaliser that made us think that perhaps this could be a bit of a tight game, but in the end, Benfica made their quality count with a couple more good goals, particularly the goal from Artur Cabral, which was a really nice little back heel, very deft touch. But in general, Barney, I think it was a very, very comfortable game for Benfica, and I think they controlled the game really well.
I actually thought Alvaro Koresh, the left back, was my favorite goal.
No, yeah.
Coming cutting inside and hitting over his weaker foot. He looks well both he looked really good in this game. I really like him. He's so confident on the ball. Maybe sometimes a bit too confident, some of the touches he tries to make, but he he's good fun to watch and yeah, he up against Balumi, I think he did well sort of pushing Balumi back because although Balumi had that wonderful hit from a corner to for that equalizer, otherwise we didn't really see too much of him. Uh, but yeah, it was interesting because I thought uh Ferenc sort of did get a little foothold of the game in the first half, after despite going that one goal down. And they did trouble Benfica a little bit, but um yeah, for Cabral and Koresh to get those goals was yeah, really really good for them. And there was some really nice bits of play from Benfica. I loved Cabral's goal, like the build up from Di
Mhm.
Maria and Bar overlapping, who did that so often. Um yeah, it was and this is the team that came out last time in the league. Heavily changed with them focusing on the Europa League, which obviously didn't go to plan. But it was, there's when you play a left back at left back, and you have your right back fit, it works. And when you play Cabral up top, who's finding spaces in the goalkeeper box, that's what he wants. That's where he wants to be. Getting onto crosses like that. That's his game. And Koshin and number 10 was where he wants to be.
Mhm.
So these little changes might seem obvious to some, and haven't seemed that obvious to Schmidt in the past. But this was a decent win because Friends have given all the big teams a good game this season. So yeah,
Mhm.
this was a good result.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting point. I mean, completely agree on Carreras. I mean, I think I said this the last time I watched him play, but again, I thought it was just the best he's played for Benfica was in this game. He seems to be improving every time he plays, but it wasn't just him. Both fullbacks really good, both fullbacks really influential. So, good to see that. Like you say, the fullbacks when you get players in the right position are playing well. I think it's a really interesting point though because obviously we saw some discontent from the fans after the game, which was very a bit disappointing to see. Probably went a bit too far. But obviously reflects where Benfica are at the moment. Now that they're out of Europe, their season's kind of confirmed that it's going to end without any silverware. That's obviously a real disappointment for Benfica, who don't expect that. Lots of fans obviously want the manager to leave, and I think he's made a lot of enemies based on his team selections, where he's just been playing people in odd positions and um, perhaps making choices that people don't understand. My question to you then, Barney, is after a game like this where they did look very comfortable and did look very assured, bringing a few players in who've perhaps been fringe players this season, fitting a few people in like Kochu and Carreras and Bar into those positions where they want to be playing. Um, can you still see any kind of future for the manager then with this squad that we're starting to see a bit more of, that we're starting to see the potential of? Um, or do you think it's perhaps that ship has sailed?
Yeah, I think the fan relationship is broken down, and there does seem to be a it's almost as if he was reluctant to play these players, because of the Europa League game. If they hadn't had the Europa League game, I'm not sure
Hmm.
this 11 would have come out. He just doesn't deal with the fans well. I think that's a real issue with Roger
Hmm.
Schmidt, and some of his comments have really alienated fans because, as you say, like they've travelled to this game, um, and to see like they've just won 3-1, and for those fans to still feel the need to communicate their dissatisfaction with what's going on, it's that's quite a sorry state of affairs, and it really doesn't reflect well on not on the fans necessarily, but on how the club's communicated, and
Hmm.
through Roger Schmidt, the majority of that communication. And so yeah, I don't know. It will be very interesting to see if he stays on, because I imagine he'll if he does get fired, there'll be sort of a quite a chunk of money he'll to sort of pay him off and that. And yeah, with them not going as far in Europe as they perhaps wanted, and being in the Champions League, yeah, it's not looking great. And this is just the cloud of the cloud that sort of covered Benfica this season. And when there's so much talent there, so many good
Hmm.
players.
Hmm.
We saw some lovely moves in this game, and yeah, it could have been so much better than it has this season.
Hmm. Absolutely. But it does, yeah, like you say, seem that that air of negativity is just hanging around Benfica at the moment, and I'm not quite sure whether the manager will be able to get that positivity back and get the fans back on side. But that's a bigger conversation, perhaps for another time. Let's do another game, Barney. Talk about Porto, who beat Casapia 2-1 away from home. Very important for Porto to get back to winning ways after a string of disappointing results. Some good performances in the Porto side, I thought, particularly from players like Galeno and Nico Gonzalez. We saw another start for Mediterranean up front, so Conceição seems to be bringing him back into the team. It's a difficult time for Porto, obviously, whose season now really rides on winning the Taça de Portugal and finishing in third place in the league. And in that sense, these wins are really important still if they are going to hold off teams like Braga and Vitória and keep that third place.
Yeah, vitally important, and it's a strong team. I think it's been important for Conceição to put Taremi back into the frame of things. I know Evan Wilson was suspended for this game, but for Taremi to sort of win his second place back from those striking options, I think that was needed, because um you can't deny his quality despite his sort of faltering from beginning of the season. Um, yeah, Gonzalez and Galeno have become really good performers for Conceição as well. And I really like Gonzalez's development into this league. He sort of really found his feet after a sort of rocky start.
Hmm.
Um, and looking more influential from midfield. From that double pivot, he's the one who's able to sort of make those passes and gets forward a bit more compared to Varela. Uh, I have to say, my favorite thing about this game was Nuno Moreira, the Casapia player, doing the Cole Palmer celebration when he scored the sort of cold. That's just like how that's sort of bled over. I'm not sure, like, yeah, I just like that. That's bled over to Casapia. Like,
Yeah. It was a really good goal, to be fair. It was a
it
nice
was a
goal.
lovely finish, yeah.
And yeah, we should mention that because obviously, Casapia did well to equalise. And I think that's one thing that I've said a few times is about also psychologically coping with games when they have setbacks. And, that equaliser for Casapia was a setback. So that's why it was um, pleasing to see Porto deal with that and hold on and get the win. And I think players like Nico Gonzalez had a big part to play in that. I think he's a player who has the right mentality. So I think he was a big influence in that sense. I just think the thing with Porto is they're in real danger of falling into that trap of thinking that the season's over just because they're not going to win the title. I think that would be a huge mistake because there is a danger of them slipping into fourth and fifth place. And I think the Europa League is really, really important for Porto. They've got a huge game coming up against Sporting next week, which we'll probably discuss in a lot more depth on our Patreon preview show. Plus, they've also got a huge game vying against Braga on the last game of the season. So it's really, really important for Porto to stay focused. Everyone involved, really, the players, the manager, everyone, and not let the season slide because there's still an awful lot to play for. And I know the fans won't. It's not what they wanted when the season started, but I think it's of the utmost importance now to get that third spot get into Europa League, try and win the Taça de Portugal, and go from there because I think that would be a respectable season at the very least. Just quickly on Casapia, Barney. I think it's interesting to look at the table in kind of two halves. And Casapia at the moment are in ninth place, so what I'm calling top of the bottom half of the table. I hope that makes sense. Although one thing that we did chat about on our watch along last night with some of the guys on the Patreon was about how some of these mid-table teams are perhaps not as exciting to watch as in recent seasons. Teams like Casapia, teams like Vizela, who kind of were exciting, promising smaller teams. Casapia, do you think they fall into that category a little bit of a team that's kind of a bit more conservative? And is that even a problem? Because, like I said, at the moment, they're top of that second tier in the Primeira Liga. They're very close to league safety, and I think it's always really important when you talk about Casapia to remember that this is easily one of the smallest clubs in the league.
Yeah, I think that's something that we sometimes easily forget. Casapia, as you say, the sort of size of the club. Um, yeah, I think the reason why perhaps some of these teams around this area of the table have been hard to sort of follow or sort of keep up with is because they've quite a lot of them gone through quite not severe transitions, but a lot of change, be that managerial and with Casapia, they've certainly been on that journey. We sort of didn't really know who they were trying to be. When last year they were sort of so stylistically unique under Felipe Martins, they've sort of gone back to that similar style of Gonzalo Santos now, the new manager. And we saw that in this game, some good, the wingers being quite effective in Yuki Soma and Nuno Moreira, who obviously got the goal. And we're seeing, the Lelo and Larrazabal getting a bit of joy getting forward a bit more. So it's, that's starting to come back into the fray for them. But I think that's been one of the issues is that there has been quite a lot of identity change with some of these clubs around this area of the table.
And of course, that's so unavoidable with the high rate of turnover that we do see in managers and players and stuff. But again, despite a loss, if they are able to survive once again and stick around that mid table position, it's a more than successful season for Casapia. All right, I want to talk about Braga versus Vizela, Barney, because this was another really interesting game. A game that ended 2-1 to Braga, and a game in which Rodrigo Zalazar was the game changer, although he didn't start the game. He came on at halftime with the game at 0-0, and scored two goals, a great individual contribution from Zalazar. My question then to you is whether you think perhaps he's been underused this season because he was an exciting signing in the summer, but hasn't really found a place in a starting 11. It does seem that Braga have struggled to find a place for him in that midfield alongside João Moutinho, player of great quality, great experience, and who seems to be given the starts. When they often play a two-man midfield, they'll play Moutinho and a more defensive player, but that does seem to have been at the expense of a player like Zalazar, who, albeit with one of them being a very fortunate goal, scored two goals in this game and showed that he can be a really exciting player for Braga and someone that can contribute a lot.
Yeah, I think when he arrived in Portugal, he was sort of seen as a attacking midfielder, and but then after George sort of towards the end of his tenure, sort of, we were seeing more of him playing that sort of double pivot alongside the likes of João Moutinho. But on the interim manager Rui Pedro Duarte, and with the return of Ricardo Horta from injury, in this game he went with Carvalho and Moutinho and that too. I think Zalazar, I think for most fans and most Braga fans, sorry, that they would see him as a vitally important player. Um, I like my sort of worldwide statistics, Albert, but uh, he actually, for his performance this season, mainly playing in that defensive midfielder, he's like the third highest midfielders for chance creation out of the non-Big Five leagues in the world. So, a messy stat, but what I'm trying to say is um, he's been really effective and he's created a lot from midfield and this goal, although one of them was a gift from the Zella keeper Roberto, who
Mm.
he's just this. Yeah, I feel like it's a conversation that a lot of every league has, and all football commentators, and including us, will have all the time, where it's like a struggling team does the new goal kick routine of sort of passing it from the centre back to the goalkeeper, and they muck up, and it's like, what are these guys doing trying to play it
I
out from the
know, I
back when
know,
they're at
I
the
know,
bottom of the team? Um,
I know.
and then, yeah, it was a real shame, and I think Roberto, I don't think he's been Buntic's the sort of first choice goalkeeper, so
Well, this
yeah.
is I did want to bring this up because Buntic was on the bench,
Mm,
so I'm not sure what happened. I don't know whether he deserves to be dropped, but like you're saying, it does kind of reek of a manager saying, "Oh, we're going to try something different with the keeper, and I want a keeper that can use his feet," and then this happened. So that was a real shame. But I mean, I think it is worth noting that Vizela went ahead in the game.
mm,
Something that I didn't clarify at the beginning. You know, Braga did have to come from behind. Samuel Ascend was back on the score sheet, and again, if you watch the goal, he just looks like a guy who scores 25 goals a season. He's really confident, really capable finisher. Um, and you know, maybe if the keeper didn't have a shocker, it would have been a different game. But I'm going to say the same thing that I said last week and the week before about Vizela Barney. You know that it's all well and good having admirable performances, but it's you know these performances have just far too infrequently turned into actual results and points. And you know that Vizela have got one or two good players dotted around the pitch, and they've got one or two good ideas, but they've run out of time to improve. They've run out of opportunities, and yeah, I think it's a shame, but they just again was just another game where we saw why they're probably going to go down.
just one more thing on Braga. I think just seeing Ricardo Horta back in the team, and I just they just feel that bit different. I don't know what it is. I seeing him taking touches in the box, like I don't see any other sort of Braga player being able to do that. Sort of that pass from the wide coming into the middle. He's takes control and just makes things happen. I'd love to. I haven't got the time to sort of get the stats but I'm sure that with him in the team, Braga's touches in the box drastically increases because he's such you do sort of see what they've been missing, and it's perhaps easy to, with Banza scoring so many goals, perhaps we forgot how important Ricardo Horta is and how good a player he is because
Mm,
yeah, he's been a big loss from this season when he's been out.
yeah. But again, Braga, another team alongside Porto and Vitória, fighting for the sort of third place spot, and a big weekend coming up for them playing Benfica, and then as I said, playing Porto in the last game of the season. So another team for whom there's still an awful lot to play for, and you know after a sticky start under the interim manager, they've now got a few wins under their belt. So slightly positive signs, but they need to keep that form going. Um, all right, let's touch on a couple of games outside of the top four. And firstly, Barney, a game that we've got to try and deal with, Chaves versus Estoril, a game where the ugly side of football really reared its head when the game, which was at 2-1 to Estoril with only a couple of minutes of stoppage time left, um, Chaves fans invaded the pitch and physically confronted Estoril players, primarily the goalkeeper, Carne. And both Carne and Pedro Alvaro defended themselves, including Alvaro kicking a Chaves fan in the chest, which was a really kind of uncomfortable moment to watch, to be totally honest with you. Um, it led to both players being sent off by the referee. The game was delayed by 20 minutes. And when it did resume with Estoril down to 9 players and playing an outfield player in goal, Shavs were then able to grab a late equalizer. Um, I mean, it was a really, really farcical situation. There was, you know, on the one hand, there's a humorous side to it, but on the other hand, there's a very serious side to it, which is that players were physically confronted on the pitch when they're just trying to do their job. And not only were they not particularly protected by the stadium staff and the officials, but actually they were punished by the officials for defending themselves. Again, I mean, if you watch the footage, it's there is a kind of extended clip available on Twitter, and it's on our Twitter page. We did share it. If you scroll down, I'm sure you'll find it, where you see the main incidents. Even the incident where Alvaro does kick the fan, you can only say he's fairly defending himself from someone who's running at him, and he does show actually a certain amount of restraint when he's actually using his foot to block the runner. Um, I think it's scandalous, really, Bonnie, that the game wasn't abandoned because I think what clearly happened was that um, security failed and the players were put at risk and they should have been taken off the pitch before any red cards were shown. I mean, I totally get that. Replaying a game at this stage of the season is a really, really difficult thing for both teams. I think it's very fortunate, actually, that this point doesn't really mean anything to either side. Estoril probably won't be relegated. Although, if they were to drop into the relegation playoff place, they'd have a real, real case for this game because those 2 points difference would have been huge. But yeah, a really, really ugly side to the game that nobody expected and we didn't really want to have to deal with.
Yeah, I think that it's the fact that it's the two Estral players who were attacked and then got sent off. That's the thing that sort of feels, whether they were defending themselves or going a bit further, I don't know. But still, if it feels like quite a real big disadvantage for Estral to have that and then continue on with the game. Yeah, it's we saw we've seen recently similar things happen in Turkey and the
Mm,
way that league has sort of not crumbled, but there's so many issues coming in the aftermath of that situation when Fenerbahce players were attacked and they defended themselves as well. Um, it just brings the league down into yeah to that sort of level, which is not great. And um, I think the unfortunate thing that will happen is if there is any sort of reconciliation about this, it'll be done months down the line
yeah,
when
yeah.
when everything's been decided, won't
Yeah, Chaves will probably be given like a 2 point deduction
it?
in the second division.
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, I mean, if to think of it of an Astral win at that point in the game, they were playing very well. João Basso was excellent to get his goal and and also very good defensively. Rodrigo Gomes was looking great back at the right wing spot. Really good performances and also to be fair to Shabs, some decent performances as well for sort of get that consolation goal at that point. Correa,
Mhm,
it's been really important for them. Um, yeah, and it's hard to analyze the equaliser, isn't it? Because
mhm,
it's such weird circumstances. But um, yeah, I do really feel that I don't know, 3 points to Astral would have been really big for them, and
mhm.
now it's just that 1 point.
Barney, my question to you then, not to put a light-hearted spin on this situation, but people often ask the question, if you played up front for a Premier League team, could you score a goal? My question to you, if you played up front for a Primeira Liga side when the opposition had an outfield player in goal, could you score?
Oh no, my shooting's terrible, man. That's probably my weakest part of the game. Who did go and go, but I couldn't really work it
I
out.
neither could I, but I guarantee you any professional outfield player playing a goal would probably be the best goalkeeper I'd ever played against. So I wouldn't fancy my chances.
Oh,
Um,
Cassian was off by that point. I was upset.
um, all right, let's touch on one last game then, Barney, and I want to talk about Famalicao versus Porto, a game that ended 2-2 with Famalicao down to 10 men after about 35 minutes. Jean de Cadiz, Barney, once again the main man up top with 2 goals. Could have been a hat trick if he hadn't missed his penalty. But he made up for it with not one but two headed goals. It's something he's making a habit of scoring. His recent form has been really good, and Famalicao in general looked like they are improving a lot under Armando Evangelista. The one thing I'm left thinking, Barney, is that perhaps if they'd had this set up from the beginning of the season, maybe they would have had a bigger part to play in this year's Primeira Liga.
Yeah, I think. You can look at perhaps individuals. I think Shaqini has been a really good acquisition coming in January on loan from Wolves. He's really helped the attack. Um, Cadiz, I think Cadiz has found his form. I don't think he was that good at the first half of the season, but his form and their success in recent weeks has come hand in hand. Um, they did well to stay in this game and come away with a point because yeah, they didn't when the centre back got sent off, the Haas. He's been a good player for them this season, another good pickup for them. But when he came off, they weren't there wasn't they weren't quick to sort of make a change and bring another centre back in. They sort of adjusted with the 10 players left on the pitch and they made a good go of it. Moore was fantastic, to get in this game and he getting an assist as well for one of the goals. Uh, yeah, it's I seeing Portsmouth in the the relegation playoff spot. I just feel like this they it feels like they've wasted an opportunity here. With Famalicao being down to 10 men and
Mm.
not being able to sort of capitalize on that, and if anything, looking worse once Famalicao did go down to 10 men. Um, because because I am rooting for Portsmouth, but I won't lie about it. But yeah, they didn't they didn't capitalize well enough in this game.
Well, it's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because they obviously did play a long period of the game with only 10 men, excuse me. And that could have been a good win. They're in the relegation playoff place currently. They are only 1 point away from safety. But Barney, their four remaining games now are Moreirense at home, Sporting away, Rio Ave at home, and Farense away. So other than Sporting, that's three games where I don't know. I'm not sure whether three more points would be enough. I feel like if they could get 4 points or maybe even six, but that's a big ask, then that could make a real difference to their position in the table. But also, I think, there's a danger there that they haven't got quite enough opportunities to really move out of that relegation playoff space.
No, time's running out for them. They are scoring, which is a good thing, despite the
Mm,
sort of not getting that many points. A lot of goals from defenders this season, which is yeah.
hmm
But yeah,
Not many goals from strikers.
yeah. But no, I think ah, you'd like to think they might get a point or two there in that running. Um, sorry, I was just bring it back to Famalicão, but Cadiz has really stepped up. It's
hmm
quite impressive to see, and we do see strikers come into purple patches, but I like the he's just brimming with confidence, Cadiz, and just looks like he's really dangerous. He's similar to how Hassan's been at times. He just
hmm
like a really dangerous striker.
Yeah, absolutely. And a player that we like to see in good form. He's been around, he's been about a bit, and good to see him playing well. Portman's last game of the season, Barney, Farense in the Algarve derby. I just feel like that's
Oh.
going to be. I feel like Farense could need something on the last day of the season, and that could be a really big game. All right. Well, I think that's all we've got time for on this week's episode of the Long Ball Football Podcast. Me and Barney are about to record our Patreon exclusive preview show, which you can listen to if you are a subscriber to our Patreon. And a reminder that it is just £1 a month. And we've got some huge games coming up this weekend with Sporting playing Porto and Benfica playing Braga. So that's going to be a really good one. We're about to get stuck into that. But that does just leave me to say thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you next week.
Yes, next week.